This sitting is resumed.
Order number 6, in the name of the Minister of Finance. No? What? Oh, order number 6. To move that the House resolve itself into Standing Finance Committee to consider the grant of sums of money for the service of this island.
Oh, he's here. Honourable for Christchurch East Central. Huh? Yeah, he can do it. He can do it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and that the House resolve itself into Standing Finance Committee.
The chair and the House resolve itself into Standing Finance Committee. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it.
This House is now in Standing Finance Committee.
In the name of the Minister in the Ministry of Finance, to move the passing of a resolution to grant the sum of $139,971,839 from the Consolidated Fund and to place it at the disposal of the government to supplement the estimates 2020 to 2021 as shown in the supplementary estimates number 6, 2020 to 2021, which form the schedule to the resolution.
At 11, at 13. Was it total? Just call away. At 13.
Head 13, Prime Minister's Office, in the sum of $5 million.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. You would recall that as a result of the Straughn speech, the government had articulated a number of initiatives that would be required to respond to the COVID environment. And therefore, the series of resolutions before the Chamber, this resolution before the Chamber this afternoon is intended to put at the disposal of a number of ministries to be able to execute between now and the end of the financial year in order to respond to a number of those initiatives that we had announced with respect to the Straughn speech. As we have said at the very beginning and the outset with respect to this COVID-19 pandemic, You would recall, Madam Chair, that we met on the very first day of the financial year, April 1st, to approve additional supplementaries, which was unprecedented. And therefore, within that vein, we continue as a government to be dynamic and be able to respond to what clearly has been a very trying and significant circumstance in the life of this country. This particular Head 13, in terms of the development of tourism potential, Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central will articulate a little further. But this really, Madam Chair, is within the context of being able to ensure that we can generate as much economic activity, certainly not just within the next 5 to 6 months, but certainly over the next 12 to 18 months as we respond domestically with respect to the fact that we know and expect that there may be some challenges with respect to the resumption of international commercial flights into the country, and therefore the government's response is to ensure that we can have as many businesses stay open to generate as much economic activity, certainly over the course of the next 18 months, and to ensure that we can keep households solvent over the course of that period, so that we do not leave anybody behind in that respect. And therefore, there will be a multifaceted approach from basically each ministry in order to ensure that we can meet that mandate. And the resolution before the Chamber this afternoon, Madam Chair, is intended, as I said, to ensure that we put the monies at the disposal of the various ministries and departments to be able to execute in response to a number of initiatives that we have announced under the throne speech. And this particular sum of money here is intended to do just that. And so with those few words, Madam Chair, I beg to move that Head 13 stand back.
Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to give a bit more detail, as the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central has indicated. And I think that it is fitting that these works and this Head 13 lead us off this afternoon, because it really is about transformation and about reimagining what Barbados will and can be, not just post-COVID, because I think what we've realized is that the world is not going to be the same as it was. But the Barbados Tourism and Investment Inc. really is at the heart, in the Ministry of Investment, is at the heart of reinvigorating Bridgetown and its environs, really reinvigorating the entire tourism product, but understanding that Barbadians and the Barbadian imagination is perhaps not going to be transformed or would benefit most from a transformation of the capital. Some time ago, we developed a Carlisle Bay and its environs tourism investment portfolio. And what that did is to really start to imagine what Bridgetown and the greater Bridgetown area could not just look like, but how it could engage and involve all people to make sure that Bridgetown could be a place that we can feel invested in, that Barbadians can once again feel like Bridgetown looks like and represents who we are, and that we have a stake in its success, and it's a place that we can live and work and play and invest and thrive. And so this sums of money, this $5 million that is here as a supplementary for this head, helps us initiate that process. And so what we have here is $1.25 million that relates to the Fairchild Street Market project. And that project, Madam Chair, is really symbolic of the fact that The whole thrust of this government in a COVID environment is to demonstrate through our policies faith in the Barbadian worker, faith in the Barbadian entrepreneur, faith in the fact that when we talk about a Barbadian private sector, it has to look a certain way. It has to represent the core and the heart of the Barbadian people. And for too long, we've seen vending as an also ran, an other. And for too long, we have considered it or perhaps seen it as something marginal to the private sector. And those days, Madam Chair, are over. In conceptualizing the Fairchild Street market redevelopment, we are sending a clear message that vending is business, that vending is something that allows people to meet and reach their full productive capacity, that allows people to explore their imagination and to develop whatever it is they would do, and to be able to make an honest living, and not just make a dollar, but to really thrive and to really be able to scale up and employ other people and make this something that people can aspire to be and to do. And so some part of this money will go to a new butcher's block for the Fairchild Street Market, as well as the paving of 39 car park bays in the general area of the redesigned and refurbished Fairchild Street Market. But we're not stopping there. These funds are also meant to give BTI a start in terms of how we really consider living in Bridgetown. Right now, I think there's a notion that there are residential areas of Bridgetown and that there are commercial areas. And what we really want to emphasize is that the Bridgetown that we imagine, and I'm really starting to take on the persona of the member for the city of Bridgetown, because it is an exciting prospect. The Bridgetown that we imagine sees residential and commercial activity taking place together, because that's really the only way that people are going to feel that they are a part of the commercial life of Bridgetown. If I'm able to live there, if I'm able to work there, if I'm able to live my full life in this place, then that is when Bridgetown starts again to be the real heart and the capital of the country. And it is important that we put all of our effort and our energy into making that happen. And so we don't want to just consider that people live in certain areas, but that all of Barbados can feel that Bridgetown is somewhere that I can live. We've been talking a lot about mixed use, residential and commercial. And the Treasury building, as it now stands, is one of those areas, one of those places that we feel will benefit from the kind of reimagining that we're talking about. And so we want to encourage people who have ideas for its design, who have ideas for how we can have residential and commercial and art and culture and all kinds of interesting things happening there, to be able to give us those ideas. And we want to start to encourage designs and expressions of interest for the development of residential development for the Treasury building as well. Some of these monies as well are going to be used for the greater Bridgetown area, the development of a conference center. I'm sure those of us who are involved in the tourism sector would understand the importance of the meetings and conferences market and how Barbados as a destination is extremely attractive for those kinds of events. And so what we said as part of our tourism redevelopment project is that where the government headquarters are now located is really prime real estate. Where government headquarters is now located, in Bay Street, if we can have in that location the kind of conference center that would mean that people come, they do their business. When they leave, they walk out onto a newly redeveloped boardwalk area where there are restaurants and people having shows and making food and selling items. That is the kind of rejuvenation that we have in mind. And so we need to start the process of making that happen and getting those on board who can do that. But I want to make a very important point about all of this redevelopment. And it is that it cannot, and under this Barbados Labour Party administration, it will not be a matter of people who have traditionally been the ones delivering goods and services in this area being the only ones who are benefiting. It has to be that fairness and equity are the principles that guide us in all of this redevelopment work. And that is why, just this morning, we sat again with some of those, with the team that is with BTI and the team that is dealing with these works, and made it clear that through our procurement processes, through our ability to be able to subcontract and to engage others, we have to make these works available to all Barbadians. All must eat in this COVID environment. And so this is also a part of our COVID relief program, because this is the way that we do the work that government needs to do to make opportunities available to all people. And so it is important, Madam Chair, that these resources be allocated to this activity, because this is an opportunity for people to be able to work, for people to be able to use their skills for the redevelopment of the capital of their country. The final thing that I will say on this matter, Madam Chair, is that a lot of the work of BTI, one of the big projects in which it is engaged now is the Golden Square project. And it is so important, not just for people to be able to work and eat and provide for their families, but for people to have ever present in their consciousness, in our consciousness, who we are. And the fact that we are here with the freedoms that we enjoy because of what happened at Golden Square, because of the people who made sure that emancipation was not just a day or an event, but that true emancipation meant that workers could have the rights that would mean that they were not tenants in their own country. And so the work of literally making visible those events and bringing them back to the everyday consciousness of Barbadians through the opening up, the literal opening up of Golden Square, and making it a space that is available to all is an important part of that national consciousness raising and building. I think it is extremely important. Not every infrastructure project has to be about a hotel or another commercial activity. There are some important projects that are about reinforcing the pride of being Barbadian, reinforcing the fact that these historical events brought us to this place where we can continue to reinforce freedom. We can continue to reject discrimination in all its forms. That is what the Golden Square Project is about. And it's not just about the history of the place, but it's the fact that the current works on this site are also themselves in the fact that they will be made of the work and the contracting will be made available to all Barbadians. That in itself reinforces the inclusion of all. And so these may sound like lofty ideals or goals for a simple 5 million, but I believe, Madam Chair, that it is important that we send these very important signals that the work that we're doing in this COVID environment to engage all is really about demonstrating our faith in the Barbadian worker, demonstrating our faith in the Barbadian indigenous idea, and showing that it can help people to thrive. It can cause people to not just stay afloat, but to rise above in this COVID environment. I'm obliged to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
One moment. Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We appreciate the enthusiasm and eagerness of the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central, but I think the opposition still does have a voice. Now, we're told this $5 million is about principally development of tourism potential around Bridgetown. And I have not heard a very persuasive case put to that effect. We've heard 1-point-something million, I can't remember if it's 2 or 1.5 million, will go towards the Fairchild Street Market project, which has been in abeyance for a while. Therefore, we are rebuilding what we knocked down in the first place, even though I would imagine the attempt is to modernize it such that vending activity there takes place in a more commodious context. I don't know that significantly necessarily that plays to the development of tourism potential in Bridgetown, but maybe it does. All I'm saying is 1.2 or 1.5 million out of the 5 million has to do with the Bridgetown Fairchild Street Market project, which really ought to have been executed quite some time ago. But we're attempting to build back a market. We want to give central prominence and a level of greater sophistication to the business of vending in Barbados. That is to be applauded, and if that's the case, just say that and not try to wrap it in all kind of tourism trappings. Now, Bridgetown is designated a World Heritage Site. And I think both the last administration and this current administration have failed to do anything significantly towards ensuring that Barbadians see it as such and that visitors to Barbados know it as such. I don't know that any of the monies being here allocated, $5 million, even intended to address that particular situation. But our capital city, which is supposed to be a World Heritage designated site, is showing significant signs of degradation. North, south, and east, and west, and in the center of it. And I'm sure the honorable member for the city would join me in putting that case. And it is not, I'm sure, as a result of any delinquency in representation on his part. But I don't think enough attention is being paid to the matter of promoting Bridgetown City as a World Heritage Site. Bridgetown itself and the wider environs of Bridgetown. None of this money seems to be going towards that effort again. Now, I've been hearing for some time from the lips of this administration that we need to have more housing in the city such that we have residential and commercial activity going on together. I suppose that is the thing which is most desirable. In many cities, we find that there is the commercial and there is the residential. And it is being mooted that this ought to be the case in Bridgetown. Don't know how much of this money, if any of it, it was mentioned during the presentation, But I don't know how much money, if any of it, is going towards that project. Now, the Treasury building has been cited as potentially a place for residential occupancy in Bridgetown. I am not schooled in these matters, neither from an engineering perspective, safety and security perspective, I should say, or any other perspective, I suppose. But it doesn't seem to me as though the Treasury building site would be the best place in Bridgetown to locate a residential occupancy community. In a sense, that building constitutes an island with traffic all around it. And if you're bringing housing to Bridgetown, perhaps other sites might be considered. I have heard that it is to be the site of a particular kind of occupancy. And my worry would have been that if you are locating people in Bridgetown for dwelling, you put children in a place like that, then you are incurring all kinds of potential hazards. You are inviting all kinds of potential hazards if children are to enter and exit a residential facility such as located in the now unused Treasury building. If it is for a special brand of occupancy, whatever that is, whether it be bachelor pads or any other type of pad, I hope it's not intended to be a same-sex pad. Yeah, I heard the suck of the teeth, but I repeat it. You have 2 rows of teeth, suck the other one. I hope it's not intended to be a building that accommodates same-sex pads, because I think that is an issue that Barbadians still have to be heard on. And I am not suggesting that that is the intended use. I have simply said, in my view, that building does not constitute an appropriate place for housing families in an urban context, especially if there are children involved. But I've also heard it said by those who believe that we could put residential dwellings there, that it would occupy specialized or specific groups, family types. In today's terms, I therefore find it my duty to express concern that there be any consideration given to turn it into a pad or a group of pads for same-sex couples. The Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central also suggested that the current location of what is the seat of government in Barbados, government headquarters, is better suited for perhaps tourism conference facilities. That is a matter of opinion. I know that there are some aspects of history and legacy that countries do not easily let go of because they bring with them or hold with them potential earnings value because of the legacy associated with them and because of the history associated with them. And we've got to be very careful in Barbados that in our quest to modernize our infrastructure and our environment, we don't do away with sites of tremendous potential value in the interest of catering to some people's tastes. Now, if you do feel persuaded as to the merits in changing the government headquarters into a conference site facility, then I have to ask the questions which are very reasonable in this day, because we've seen leisure spaces, recreational spaces taken away from Barbadians. And I know just adjacent to, across the road from government headquarters is a very popular recreational and leisure area for Bajans who go both to the beach, who hang out by the esplanade, who watch sunsets from there, who indulge in other relaxing therapeutic activities there, who frequent that beach. And I have to ask what happens to that, and if there are any implications for that type of activity if you turn government headquarters into a recreational facility. On the other side of the building, of course, there are many dwellers living in small chattel houses just outside the walls of Government House. I'm talking about the Bay Land. As you approach government headquarters on Bay Street, if you come down Beckles Road on the left, there are many families who for years, decades, have lived in working class communities, in chattel houses, just outside of government headquarters at the back of the walls. And if you plan to put a modern conference facility that caters to commercial and tourist-related activity, then I have to ask on behalf of those people, what are the implications for them? I find it very hard to imagine that you would construct a modern conference center facility where government headquarters is and leave those people just outside the walls. So what would be the implications for them, and has anybody considered consulting them as to their view, as to the value they attach to their current location, etc., etc., etc. Also want to say, one may hold the view that we need more housing in the city. I hold the view that we need better housing in the city, in the constituency of the city of Bridgetown. And I'm joining my honorable friend from the city in calling for that. For whatever reason, he failed to benefit from the upgrading of housing through the neighborhood projects intended for Cats Castle and Green Fields. Significantly denied that opportunity to improve housing for those folks. And you could go into the wider Bridgetown and you get out into places like Chapman Street and Chapman Lane, you get out into places like Orleans and other areas like that. You come on the other side of it and you come into the Nelson Street, Wellington Street area, and I'm saying you've got a lot of poor quality housing located in these precincts, in these areas within the precincts of Bridgetown, its wider environs. So while the government might make the call for more housing in the city, I am joining my honorable colleague from St. Michael, Bridgetown City, in joining for better housing in Bridgetown City, because the people of Greenfields, the people of Cats Castle, people in New Orleans, people in Nelson Street, people in Wellington Street, these people matter too. We cannot cater to the interests of those who are involved in the business of construction and infrastructural development and make secondary or omit any consideration for those who live in squalid working class conditions in Bridgetown. And yes, call for better house, for more housing if you would. I would join you in that. But I think a greater priority is better housing in Bridgetown. And that ought to be the mantra and motto of this government. I am sure that it beats upon the breast and in very low terms, though no one seems to listen, of the honorable member for Bridgetown City, that we need better housing for the people in Bridgetown. We cannot say that the last administration caused an opportunity to be lost in getting improvements of housing in Bridgetown, and we blame them and stop there. The situation still obtains. People live in poverty, people live in squalor, people live in very poor quality housing. There's hardly any room to breathe between houses. People share lots of common spaces in Bridgetown City and even parts of St. Michael West. But this debate today is about Bridgetown City, and this portion of this supplementary request has to do with Bridgetown City, and I want to join my honorable friend in calling for better housing before more housing, better housing in Bridgetown City, and better attempts to develop Bridgetown City. Look, we're talking about $5 million to help with this and help with that in relation to development of tourism potential. The truth of the matter is, Bridgetown is closing down, and closing down not slowly. Every day, seemingly almost, you go in Bridgetown, you see a new business closing down. We're blaming it on COVID, but this was in progress before COVID. I keep saying that. Bridgetown is closing down, and people are moving out. Businesses are closing down. Some are moving out in hopes of a better day. And we come here and we say we want to develop tourism potential in the city. Well, we've got to stop the slide first and improve housing as well as even you attempt to do that.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Member for the City.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to spend a few minutes in relation to the constituency of the city of Bridgetown and the development that is to take place there, and to say that I would certainly agree that the city of Bridgetown requires both more housing and better housing, and that has been so for quite some time. Regrettably, we weren't able to get the two communities done, as was promised with the neighborhood upgrade program. But apart from those two communities, the city of Bridgetown is in dire need of some housing upgrades and improvement. And I have every confidence that this government, when the funds are available, will do what is required to assist the people in the city of Bridgetown. And I recall the Prime Minister herself saying that starting with Murphy's Pasture and New Orleans, that there will be some assistance that will be coming to persons, and also the fact that the pit toilet eradication program is going to ramp up shortly. So there's some benefits there, but there's still a lot more work that is required in the constituency of the city of Bridgetown. And I recall, for example, and I had discussions with the Honourable Member for Christchurch West in relation to a parcel of land that was purchased under the last administration on Mason Hall Street for housing, and that nothing was done about that, and that is certainly an area that can provide some housing solutions for persons in the city of Bridgetown, as well as another parcel of land in the White Park, Kings Village area that can also provide housing for persons in the city of Bridgetown. The Treasury building, for some time now we've been talking about that project and converting that structure into housing units, and I recall that the Prime Minister had indicated that those units would be geared towards persons for starter homes, professionals, young professionals who would enjoy the hustle and bustle of city life, to be able to come into the city of Bridgetown in those kind of homes before moving on when they start to make families and so on. But I believe that the commencement of the Hyatt Hotel, for me personally, would be a strong signal that we are really making the move towards the rejuvenation of the city of Bridgetown, because that facility will provide not only jobs, it will improve the environs of the facility and also bring some life, some commercial activity into the city. And I certainly will be looking forward to that. The construction of a facility where government headquarters is, an institution, whatever is supposed to be going there, I'm hearing a conference center, and the movement of the geriatric hospital, because we are looking to construct a new geriatric hospital somewhere in the Waterford Plantation area. And I am looking forward to that for a number of reasons, because we have to move in a different direction in relation to the care of the elderly in this country, given the situation that we have with an aging population and the need to look to redefine, in my view, how we provide geriatric care services and healthcare services in Barbados. And that is one thing that for me is exciting. I also know, and it was stated at several meetings that I've attended, that, and I know that the residents in the surrounding areas have been engaged on this matter, and engaged to the extent that there have been site visits and so on in terms of the relocation of persons. And I believe that included in the estimates of, in these supplementary estimates would be some funds to be able to kickstart that process. But the point that was mentioned by the last speaker, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, in relation to Heritage Bridgetown, is one that I take on board. And I take that on board because I do believe, I felt so for a while, and I know I recall having discussions with the former Minister of Tourism before COVID on this matter, and I started to see some movement in that direction. But I do believe that as a country, and this is not playing any sort of blame game, but I don't think that we have maximized or optimized the benefits that we should have in relation to Bridgetown being a heritage site, a World Heritage Site. And I feel that a lot more can be done. As I said, having engaged the former Minister of Tourism, member for St. James Central, I was satisfied that we were moving in a direction that would facilitate a lot of the things that I felt, not only as the MP for the city of Bridgetown, but a person who grew up in the city, that if we really had maximized and we start to go in the direction of heritage tourism, cultural tourism, and those are areas that are fast, that they're generating the most revenue now in terms of the entire tourist industry. That's a fact. And those heritage tourists, cultural tourists, seem to spend more money than other types of tourists when I did my research on this. And I feel that that is something that I would like to see kickstart, to the extent that I believe there's a close relationship, in my view, for example, with Spikestown and Bridgetown. Spikestown is not designated in the way that Bridgetown is, but Spikestown has a rich cultural and historical legacy, and the two of them can come together. And I believe that if we really start to look at heritage tourism in the way that we ought to going forward, that this could really be something that is beneficial for the people of Barbados, and certainly for Spikestown and for Bridgetown. And I would even say to some extent to Oistins, in terms of the whole relationship there with the Cromwellian forces being repelled in Spikestown and then shifting to Oistins in the declaration in Oistins. We can tie all of this together, and the fortifications that are around these three towns. I believe that there's a story there that is to be told. And my push would be to ensure that persons living in these towns get the chance to be able to tell the story. And we have enough young people, intelligent people, who can be trained to do what is required. And I would really like to see us pick this up to the extent that it not only becomes a revenue earner, but a sense of pride for the people who live in these three towns, and certainly in the city of Bridgetown, that I have the honor and pleasure to represent. But generally speaking, the whole situation in Bridgetown and the revival, the rejuvenation of Bridgetown, this is something that has been on my mind for a number of years. And I recall several months ago, I was given a pictorial view of what the new Bridgetown would look like. And I was excited, I mean, really excited. If those plans really come through, Bridgetown is going to be a city out of this world. I mean, something that everyone, every Barbadian will really be very, very proud of. And I am looking forward to that and to see the start of those activities. Remember, too, that there's also some plans to develop in the area of Carlisle Car Park and some other facilities around Bridgetown. We've not completed the project that goes from the Pierhead, or the Careenis, sorry, right up to the Globe. We had done most of that well in previous Barbados Party government, and we are now looking to complete that so that there could be boating and kayaking along that area. And I really do think that the plans of Bridgetown are really, really exciting. But what I will say is that we need to start some action. We need to let people see that it is going to become a reality, because these things have been going on for quite some time. But I look forward to the day when they are fully realized. And so I am really happy that included in the supplementary really are funds to help us to be able to redesign and redevelop, reconstruct, reimagine Bridgetown. And with those few words, Madam Chair, I am obliged.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. James Central.
Madam Chair, very briefly, I think that some very important observations have been made in this debate, and I want just to make a very small contribution. The fact is that the Honourable Member who just took his seat hit the nail on the head. The matter of heritage Bridgetown is very closely linked to the point that is raised, and properly so, by the Leader of the Opposition. And I think it is important that we have a clear understanding of the developmental trajectory that has to be followed in order to get us to where we need to be. There is a $20 million funded project in heritage tourism, which has been concluded in terms of negotiations, the necessary supporting work in terms of professional staffing and so on for the execution of the project, the establishment of the project office. All those things are in place. Along came COVID-19 and almost dropped an anchor on the actual execution work. Now, I use a phrase that I heard a couple of days ago in the first trimester of the period that I am out of the ministry, and obviously the new minister is in the first trimester of the period that she is minister. But the fact of the matter is, Madam Chair, that I think there is no doubt whatsoever that there is continuity and an intention of continuity on the part of this government, and that the new Minister of Tourism would have at the forefront of her plans for execution of work the continuation of that very important project in Heritage Bridgetown. And let us not forget that this is a matter that should be top of mind, awareness in the mind of the Leader of the Opposition, because I brought this matter to Parliament. Parliament signed off on it, and what you just were treated to by the Honourable Member for the City is his reference to the Heritage Trail that would take visitors through Bridgetown and allow the average visitor to come face to face on a trail being conducted by night or by day of all of the historic landmarks, religious landmarks, legal landmarks, cultural landmarks, etc., that comprise this UNESCO World Heritage Site. And obviously, when you're looking at $20 million in expenditure, or a substantial part of that in physical infrastructure, you're going to therefore have to do a lot of refurbishment and refreshing of the city of Bridgetown, and that is what the plan is, just to remind my friend, the Leader of the Opposition. But how does that then become linked to the point that he makes about housing? It becomes linked to the point he makes about housing because as part of the totality of the developmental vision of the government, we have identified not only that type of project in Heritage Bridgetown, but the need for us to have substantial investments along that crescent that we call Carlisle Bay. The honourable members of this House will remember that it was in 2019, in the month of February, that we held for the first time in Barbados an investment conference on tourism, and that we had a number of investors brought here. I enjoyed, in particular, the opportunity to work with my friend, the Honourable Member for St. Michael's South Central, who would have played a very leading role in her capacity as the Minister responsible for investment in helping us to execute that successful conference. And there were a number of people who have expressed an interest. Now, obviously, a $200 million hotel is not something that is going to appear overnight. And we had identified about 16, I believe, greenfield locations where people had expressed interest in doing this kind of investment. Now, again, within a year of that time, along came COVID. But how does it get us to the point that the Leader of the Opposition wants us to come to, which is to have a refurbished quality of housing in Bridgetown. We get there by way of the planning gains that this Prime Minister and this government so astutely introduced into the new Town Planning Act, which passed this Parliament, and again, I believe was piloted by the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central. And those planning gains allow for the investments to have investors to commit a percentage of the investment money, plow it back into the development of housing, the development of sporting facilities, the development of that necessary infrastructure that undergirds proper community development in the city of Bridgetown and around the city of Bridgetown, and even in the constituency of the Honourable Leader of the Opposition himself. So it is not, I think, fair for the Leader of the Opposition to come here and shoot a political shot across the bow and make the unthinking, nascent, and unsuspecting Barbadian citizen believe that, oh, the government ain't doing nothing and they ain't doing nothing for housing, and the thing is that you need to get better quality housing. Of course we do, but the money has to come from somewhere. And even the Leader of the Opposition would agree that it really is a stroke of ingenuity to make sure that an investor who's saying, I want to spend $200 million on a hotel in Barbados, commits a percentage of that, 20 million perhaps, towards the development of the sporting infrastructure in the city of Bridgetown, the cultural facilities for the people of Bridgetown, the road works and road rehabilitation. Otherwise, we would have to find that money out of the taxpayer's pocket. And therefore, sir, I wanted just to remind the member for St. Michael, Leader of the Opposition, St. Michael West of this. I am sure that he did not need to be reminded, sir. I am sure that this is obviously part of the mischievousness that takes place in what is called the silly season, when you have an election campaign in the air and all sorts of things that need not be said are said. But the reality is, Madam Chair, that is the trajectory of this government, and I just wanted the record to reflect that as we go forward. I'm obliged to you.
Thank you. Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Madam Chair, I really want to thank honourable members for their contributions. I would just conclude this head by reinforcing the point that the regeneration of any capital city is a very complicated and complex matter. And we have to be very conscious that in an environment where we inherited a government where the public finances were in absolute disrepair, we've had to bring back a level of confidence once again into this country, and we had set about the work with respect to being able to achieve that. And the honourable member for St. James Central, along with the honourable member for St. Michael South Central, as just articulated, has started a process whereby the identification of how we will move through that regeneration process through the introduction of planning gains, working with the communities across urban Barbados, would see over the course of 7 to 10 years the regeneration of Bridgetown. Now, the honourable member would appreciate that, and he knew and he knows where we came from as a country. He knew exactly the plans that we were intending to execute as a government, and would recognize that as we stand here now, the mission is to ensure that many of those persons in those very urban communities across Barbados, that our primary mission now is first to keep them safe, which the honourable member for the city is working and doing a very good job at, but equally at this particular point in time to ensure that as many of them are working to be able to support their families at this time. And that is why the honourable member for St. Michael South Central was at pains to indicate that the manner in which we execute these projects across, not just in the context of Bridgetown, but certainly across the country, that we have to ensure that we bring along as many people, as many businesses, small, medium, and large, Madam Chair, in order to ensure that Barbados, over the course of the next 18 months, that everybody pretty much can live in this country. And with those few words, Madam Chair, I beg to move that Head 13 stand part.
Question is that Head 13 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Head 27, the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport, in the amount of $3,414,578.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The sums being requested under Head 27 really reflects a couple of key important developments which should come as no surprise to the Chamber. With the onset, certainly, of COVID-19, a lot happened quite quickly in a very short space of time in terms of, one, the complete disruption with respect to air travel, and obviously as a consequence of that, the cessation of tourism and the related activities associated with that. Now, this chamber is well aware of the long-standing issues as it relates to the financing of the regional airline called LIAC, and at the moment is currently under administration as we speak. Now, in response to that, obviously Barbados has had to make some strategic decisions in terms of how do we ensure that once COVID is brought under control such that we can have travel returning to Barbados in a full way, that we needed to ensure that we have the capacity in order to be able to do that. And therefore, in part, Madam Chair, $600,000 and $600,002 is being requested with respect to the newly formed company Barbados Aircraft and Aviation Services Company Limited, in order to ensure that we can do the preliminary work that is required to further expand regional travel into Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean, and therefore this particular supplementary is meant to support the work in that space. But more importantly, Madam Chair, you would recall that the caves of Barbados, which of course Harrison Cave as persons would be more familiar with, has had a significant hit with respect to obviously its revenue over the course of the last 6 months because of the cessation of not just air travel, but certainly the cruise industry would have come to a complete halt as a result of COVID-19. And naturally, in respect of the fact that the revenue would have fallen off significantly to zero for the most part, the commitments under which this loan they're still due with respect to the Caribbean Development Bank. And therefore, we are making available as a government these sums available to the Caves of Barbados to be able to service its debt with the Caribbean Development Bank in order to ensure that, as you would appreciate, Madam Chair, having just restructured a government's, central government's debt, it is important that we ensure that we keep our good name with our multilateral partners who have been at the side of Barbados since we came to office to help us through the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program. And therefore, this is intended to cover the debt service payments for October 2020, as well as January of 2021, in order to ensure that the Caves of Barbados, that loan that it has with the Caribbean Development Bank for the redevelopment of the cave, Madam Chair, that loan will not go into default because of the inability of the cave to earn revenue at this time, and therefore the government, being the shareholder, is taking the responsibility for being able to cover those two debt service payments. But all in all, Madam Chair, the primary work of the Barbados Aircraft and Aviation Services is to ensure